Good morning. This is the first edition of Channel 2 News for Thursday, December 20th. I'm Jerry Harper. A few more trains are running, and there are here and there a bus, but there's still no end in sight to the transit workers' strike that will soon enter its fourth morning rush hour. The unions are not talking with the CTA. The mayor continues to hang tough, and the circuit court, after a day-long hearing, has still made no decisions. The hearing will resume this morning at 11 a.m. on a CTA request that an injunction be issued to force workers back to work. In court Wednesday, CTA lawyers were asking for a $1,000 fine for each day of the strike, for each worker on the picket line, a $5,000 fine per day for each union board member, and a $500,000 fine per day for each one of the two striking unions. During the hearing, union leaders refused to answer questions, and the judge threatened them with contempt of court. The CTA brought business leaders who testified that the strike cost the business in the city more than $15 million in just the first 2 days. Mayor Byrne fielded questions about the CTA strike last night while she appeared as the guest of Chicago Feedback on Channel 11. Several striking CTA employees were in the audience. When one confronted her on the cost of living clause the union is fighting to keep in its contract, the mayor fired back.
What you are asking us to do is ask the taxpayer to continue something that was granted 28...
Wait, just a second. Let's let the mayor speak. You spoke
28 years ago when the cost of living was 2%. Now, you're saying that you don't get any sick time or you don't get... It's almost ridiculous for me to bring up because it's certainly been well publicized, but my daughter does work for the CTA. And I was aghast when she brought home what they got. You people get dental program. You people get full coverage in hospitals. City Hall doesn't get that. The starting salary of a secretary in City Hall is $100 to $150 less. I mean, the CTA is the place to work in town, let me tell you.
Mayor Byrne also said that lawyers coming into the city government make less than most CTA drivers. Mayor Byrne shared the spotlight with CTA Chairman Eugene Barnes during a news conference at City Hall Wednesday. Barnes overshadowed the mayor when he began talking about union salaries.
I have here over 120 people that has made this year between $30,000 to $50,000 in bus operation. The highest salary of the person on here is a bus serviceman. He doesn't even drive a bus. He cleans the bus. There is a great deal of distance between need and greed. And what's embodied in the request of the union leadership on the people of the city of Chicago is greed. It is not need.
Barnes says it's ironic that CTA riders, many earning $4 or $5 an hour, are being asked to contribute to wage hikes for the transit workers. Many of them, he says, earning $25,000 to $50,000 a year. There were angry pickets outside a bus barn at North and Cicero Wednesday morning when a dozen or so buses rolled out of the yard. Before they could roll, police had to chop through a chain keeping the gate shut. Someone had apparently tampered with the lock, making it impossible to open. The token fleet of buses finally emerged amid jeers and catcalls, and each bus was escorted by a police car. Later in the day, 5 striking CTA drivers were taken into police custody and charged with disorderly conduct after they apparently threatened a driver on one of the buses. On the L's last night, there was more service than the night before. Trains ran up to Evanston for the first time this week, adding to the partial service on the Howard, the Ravenswood, and the Lake Dan Ryan lines. The service is still free, but as John Drummond reports, there's been some grumbling about cattle car conditions.
This was the scene during this evening's rush hour in the Loop as homeward-bound commuters attempted to board jammed L trains. For a time on the State and Lake platform, Ravenswood trains were so packed that many passengers were unable to get on board. Despite the wait between trains, most patrons we talked to were glad to see the partial restoration of service.
It's better than nothing at all.
Better than nothing at all?
Yes, because on Tuesday I had to walk some 9 or 10 blocks to get to the train, to get to work.
Hey, that's not right, because after we done paid $30 for our bus pass, then they gonna take the strike. That's not right.
That's a mess.
We guarantee for a bus ride.
We didn't even stop.
Cattle car. All right.
While Ravenswood trains were filled to capacity, there was plenty of room for those taking the Lake and Dan Ryan service. As was the case last night, supervisory personnel were at the controls. Although not shown on camera, we spotted the CTA's executive director, George Crandall's, working as a motorman on one of the Ravenswood runs. John Drummond, Channel 2 News.
CTA officials are predicting that today's morning rush hour will be a lot like yesterday's. Well, that could mean jam-packed platforms like this one at the Belmont station on the Howard line, where people had to wait for 2 or 3 trains before they found one with space. There'll be some additional service this morning. Starting at 6 a.m., there'll be a 4-car shuttle between Linden and Howard. 6 cars will run from Howard to Belmont starting at the same time. And there'll be 15 to 10-minute service on the Lake Dan Ryan and Ravenswood lines. One word of warning, do not bank on a bus. There will be few, if any, on the streets today. As bad news piled up today at the Chicago School Board, members voted unanimously to request that negotiations on the recent teacher's contract be reopened. That vote followed an announcement from the Arthur Anderson accounting firm that the board could face more than a $500 million deficit when this fiscal year ends. On top of that, the chairman of the board's reorganization committee warned that schools might be forced to close unless the board gets substantial help soon from the city, state, and banks. Jerome Van Gorkum saying the schools need $190 million just to meet the January expenses, called the situation desperate.
Schools close, it will make it just that much more difficult to get them reopened again. And the financial burden will be even greater when you try to do so.
Van Gorkum also said that the solution for the board is to borrow money. But that won't be easy, he said, unless the legislature raises the school property tax. Without a tax hike, he said, the financially strapped school system would have trouble getting long-term loans. Now, the gas crunch here in Chicago may be easing up a bit. 3 more oil companies have settled with the striking gasoline tank truck drivers. Gulf, Phillips, and Continental all signed new contracts with the Teamsters yesterday, and gas should start rolling into their stations as soon as the trucks are loaded. Well, that leaves Shell and Texaco as the only companies still being struck. There are hopes this morning that a $1.5 billion federal loan guarantee for the financially troubled Chrysler Corporation may clear Congress by today. The Senate passed its version of a bill providing that guarantee last night, calling for $525 million in wage concessions from union employees. The union says that figure is too high. The union hopes that the figure can be brought closer to the House $400 million figure in a congressional conference today. Families of the American hostages in Iran may make it to Tehran for Christmas after all. Early Wednesday, the Iranian Interior Minister said the families would be allowed to visit. But the militant students said no decision has been made, and they would make it. The militants also picked a fight with their government over whether the hostages should be tried. And the government puts its foot down. The Ayatollah Beheshti, the Revolutionary Council secretary, and one of Iran's most powerful political and religious leaders said the militants would not have the final say.
Last decision should be taken by Revolution Council and Imam, and the ideas of our students and our people and nation will be asked and considered in these decisions.
Iran's foreign minister is also saying that an unspecified group of Christian clergy will be permitted to visit the hostages during Christmas. The Bulls and the Blackhawks played Wednesday. The Bulls did well. The Blackhawks might as well have stayed home. Johnny Morris reports.
The Blackhawks did it again. They played a scoreless tie game for the second time this season. Chicago nothing, Pittsburgh nothing. Neither team was sparkling on offense tonight before a dead crowd at the stadium. Greg Milan, the Penguin goalie, got his biggest test here before this barrage was over. He had stopped shots by Keith Brown and Doug Wilson, but the game was destined for a scoreless tie. The 4th shutout of the year for Tony Esposito, and he earned it on this upcoming play. you're going to see Ron Stackhouse come down the slot. He'll get knocked around, but gets the shot off, only to have Espo make the save. The 71st shutout of Tony's illustrious career, the final 0-0. In other games, the Rangers beat Vancouver 5-3. It was Toronto and Los Angeles tying, and Minnesota beat Montreal 5-2. The Bulls played at Houston tonight and beat the Rockets by a score of 108-102. The Rockets led by 3 after 1 quarter as they controlled the boards. 2 tries for Moses Malone and a bucket for 2 of his 33 points. Malone also had 21 rebounds. The Bulls came back in the second quarter. Dwight Jones on the front end of a fast break. He had 15. And this young Houston fan was enjoying the action, we think. Then a Chicago surge. Fast break as Reggie Theus came in with the stuff. He had 20. David Greenwood had 29. The Bulls led by 6 at the half, but as in most NBA games, it came down to the end. This shot in the final minute by Ale Johnson made it 102-98 Chicago. The Rockets came back, but trailed 106-102. Rick Barry missed the three-point shot. The Bulls' Reggie Theus put it on ice. The final 108-102. In other games, the Celtics beat the Philadelphia 76ers 112-89. It was Atlanta over the Lakers. Kansas City beat Washington by 10. And in college play, DePaul blew a 15-point lead but held on to beat Eastern Michigan 57-55, 19 points for Mark Aguirre. And Louisville upset Ohio State 75-65.
No sign of rain or snow in the color radar picture for this morning, and that's good news unless you're dreaming of a white Christmas. Today should be mostly sunny with a high way up in the middle or upper 40s. Tonight's forecast for fair with a low in the lower or middle 30s. Right now, the temperature reading is 34 degrees officially at Midway. It's 36 at the Loop and the Lakefront, and 38 out at O'Hare. Humidity now is at 79% with the winds from the northeast at 9 miles an hour, giving us a wind chill factor of 24 degrees, which really isn't very chilly. And that's the first edition of the Channel 2 News for Thursday, December 20th. I'm Jerry Harper.
I'm Ted Pearson, speaking for the Illinois Communist Party. We don't agree with Channel 2 that the school crisis can be solved by the business establishment. They're the ones who've caused the problem. The basic problem in the schools is a lack of money. State and federal funds have been cut, teachers have been laid off, programs eliminated. And it's no surprise that the crisis comes now when 80% of public school children are black and minority. Now the bankers want bigger cutbacks and higher taxes. It's time to put a stop to this crime. There's no real lack of funds. The money's just in the wrong place. There's a $500 million surplus lying in the state treasury. The board lost $128 million from HEW for its refusal to desegregate. Corporate profits have jumped 20% over last year every quarter this year. The President and Congress are adding a fantastic $20 billion to the military budget. The time has come to put the needs of the people before the greeds of the big banks, corporations, and the Pentagon. Let's unite, black, white, and Latino, for a school board representing the people, and struggle to have no cutbacks in education, no teacher layoffs, no payless paydays. Let's tax those who've got the money, the banks and corporations who've profited from the labor of working people. Let's cut the military budget. Let's guarantee a good education for all children, regardless of race, nationality, or sex. The Communist Party is working for these goals. If you're interested, call us. We're in the phone book. Thank you.
That was Ted Pearson speaking for the Illinois Communist Party.